All right, we are about to dive into one of the most legendary and, frankly, haunting poems ever written, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Now, you might be thinking, gingy old poetry, but trust me, forget that. This is basically a supernatural thriller, a ghost story set on the high seas, and it's got a message that's maybe more important today than it was back then.
So let me just start with this question to get us going. What kind of story do you think is so powerful, so gripping, that it could literally stop someone on their way into a wedding celebration? Because that is exactly how this whole thing kicks off.
So picture this. An old, grizzled sailor with this crazy look in his eye grabs a guy who's about to go party at a wedding. The guest is like, "Hey, let me go," but he can't. He is completely transfixed by the mariner's glittering eye. He becomes like a little kid, just mesmerized. He has no choice but to listen to this wild tale. And you know what? Neither do we.
Okay, so here's our course for this journey. We'll start with the mariner's incredible story, then get to the terrible crime he commits. We'll see the curse that follows, meet a pretty terrifying ghost ship, witness a surprising moment of grace, and finally unpack the big lesson at the end. It's a real journey from a terrible sin to a very hard-earned redemption. First up, let's get into the mariner's strange tale. This isn't just any old sea story. This is a story that absolutely has to be told. So the mariner begins his tale, and at first everything's great. The ship leaves the harbor, sun is shining, everyone's happy. But then, bam, this monster storm hits and blows them way, way south into this nightmare world of just ice and fog. I mean, it's a place where nothing seems to live. And then, out of that desolation, a huge seabird appears, an albatross. For the crew, it's like a sign from heaven, a symbol of hope.
The albatross actually hangs around, becoming a kind of good luck charm for the ship. It feels like they've been saved, which is exactly what makes the mariner's next move so absolutely shocking. It's a completely senseless crime against the natural world.
And this is the part that's so chilling. For no reason that he ever explains, with no motive at all, the mariner does the unthinkable. He says it so simply, it just cuts right through you. Just like that, their symbol of hope is dead.
Now, the crew's reaction here is fascinating. At first, they are furious. They're like, "You idiot, you killed the bird that brought us the good wind." But then the fog lifts and the sun comes out, and suddenly they completely change their minds. Now they're saying, "Oh, good job. It was right to kill a bird that only brings fog and mist." By saying that, they basically sign on to his crime, and oh yeah, they are definitely going to share his punishment. And that punishment doesn't take long to arrive. A terrible curse falls on the ship and the sea itself. And this is where the real suffering kicks in.
Immediately, the wind just vanishes. The sails droop. The ship just stops, dead in the water. The poem uses this incredible image. It's like they're a painted ship on a painted ocean. The whole world just becomes still and silent. They're completely, utterly trapped. And then comes maybe the most famous lines in the whole poem. The irony is just unbelievably cruel. They're surrounded by this vast, endless ocean, but there isn't a single drop of it they can drink. The thirst becomes this agonizing psychological torture. The crew, furious and suffering, decides to make the mariner's guilt physical. They take the dead body of the albatross and literally hang it around his neck. So now his crime isn't just a bad memory. It's this heavy, decaying weight he has to carry with him everywhere. A constant, gruesome reminder of what he did. So he's alone, cursed, and dying of thirst. And just when you think things can't possibly get any worse, he sees something out on the horizon. This brings us to one of the most terrifying parts of the story, the appearance of a ghost ship, and a game of dice for the mariner's soul. Just try to imagine the horror. He sees a tiny speck in the distance. Then it gets a little bigger, a bit of a blur, and then he realizes it's a ship. But wait a second, there's no wind. How is it moving? It's gliding across the water with this unnatural speed right towards them. It's a ghost ship, a skeletal wreck. And the crew of this ghost ship? Well, it's just two passengers. The first is Death himself, a skeleton. The other is a woman even more horrifying,
called life and death. And they're playing dice. They're gambling for the lives of everyone on the Mariner's ship. Death wins the 200 crewmen, but life and death, she wins the Mariner. And trust me, that is a way worse fate. And then her curse begins. The Mariner is forced to watch as all 200 of his shipmates die. One by one, they just drop down dead on the deck. And he's left totally, utterly alone, surrounded by the corpses of his crew. This is the absolute lowest point for the Mariner. But it's here, in the darkest depths of his despair, that something begins to shift. We're about to see the tale move from a curse to a blessing. This is the turning point. For 7 straight days and nights, he's in a living hell. He can't pray for forgiveness. He can't even die to escape. He's just stuck. And worst of all, he feels the eyes of the dead crewmen staring at him, cursing him from beyond the grave. It's a state of complete spiritual agony. And then something changes. In the moonlight, he's watching these water snakes swimming around the ship. Creatures he probably thought were slimy and gross before. But for some reason, he suddenly sees their beauty. And without even thinking about it, a feeling of love just erupts from his heart, and he blesses them. It wasn't planned. It was a pure, spontaneous moment of grace. And in that exact instant, the moment he feels that unplanned love, the physical weight of his sin is lifted. The albatross, that heavy corpse around his neck, just falls off and sinks like lead into the sea. The curse is finally broken. His penance can truly begin. Now, the Mariner is eventually rescued and makes it home, but his ordeal isn't over, not by a long shot. He's left with a penance he has to pay for the rest of his life, and a final, powerful lesson that leaves him a sadder and a wiser man. So his penance is this. He has to wander the earth, and whenever he feels this agony overcome him, he has to find a specific person and tell them his story. And the lesson is really simple, but so profound. The best way to pray, the best way to be close to God is to love everything that God created. Every person, every bird, every animal, all things great and small. It's a call for radical, universal empathy. And the story has a huge effect. Remember the wedding guest from the very beginning? He doesn't even go into the wedding reception. He just walks away, stunned. He is now a sadder man because he understands the suffering and darkness in the world. But he's also a wiser man because he now understands the deep importance of love for all of life. And that's where the poem leaves us, really, transformed. It kind of forces us to think about our own relationship with nature, with the world around us. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. What does the albatross symbolize to you? Is it a burden of guilt we carry? A responsibility to the planet? Or maybe something else entirely? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.